Greetings, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the UAE Ministry of Economy and the annual investment meeting, we'd like to welcome you all to AIM Digital 2020, Africa Regional Focus Session. My name is Yasmin Shah, and I'm your MC for today. Just a few technical reminding notes before we get started. If you experience any issues with your audio or video during the conference, just refresh your browser and that should take care of everything. If you have any questions for our speakers or panel members, please do feel free to post your questions on the video wall, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. We will share with our speaker at the end of the session, and they will reply to you through the video wall or through the email afterwards. If you'd like to connect with our speakers, please move to the home lobby page. You can find the speaker by typing their names under Networking tab on the right-hand corner of your screen. We welcome all of our audience to interact with each other through our networking features. And also, please feel free to tag us on our social media handles with the hashtag AIMDigital. I'd like to welcome you to join our virtual Africa Regional Focus Session. It's titled Regional Investment Agreements and Investment Drivers in Africa, Shaping Global Investment Strategies through the African Continental Free Trade Area, chaired by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. The session will provide a platform to discuss the importance of investment regulation and investment drivers from an African perspective against the backdrop of the African Continental Free Trade Area. More specifically, the session will assess what opportunities the AfCFTA could provide in terms of enhancing investment attractiveness by consolidating investment regulation at a continental level, whilst at the same time safeguarding the policy autonomy of African countries and leveling the playing field between the different types of investors. Today, we are joined by Mr. Stephen Karinji, who is the Director of Regional Integration and Trade Division of UNECA, His Excellency Gabriel Curtis, the Minister of Investments and Public-Private Partnerships, Guinea, and Mr. Yofi Grant, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Ghana Investment Promotion Center. Your Excellencies, the stage is yours.
Session under the annual investment meeting. This session has actually been running for a couple of years now. Every time we've had the annual investment meeting, we were supposed to have this meeting back in April, but due to the pandemic, we had to postpone. The annual investment meeting was postponed, and now here we are having it on a virtual basis. I'm happy to have with me during this session two distinguished speakers. The Minister of Investment and Public-Private Partnership of the Republic of Guinea, His Excellency Gabriel Curtis, and also Mr. Yofi Grant, the CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. My name is Stephen Karinji. I'm the Director for Regional Integration and Trade Division, and I've been in this organization for the last 16 years, working on issues of regional integration. So let me now introduce our two panelists. That is Mr. Curtis first, the Minister for Investment and Public-Private Partnership of the Republic of Guinea. Mr. Curtis was appointed to this role more than 2 years ago, and as he heads the department that is responsible for the elaboration and carrying out of the government policies in the fields of investment and public-private partnerships. In addition, he is also the Commissioner General that oversees Guinea's participation at Expo 2020, which we are looking forward to in Dubai next year. And before that, he was formerly the Managing Director of the Republic of Guinea's Private Investment Promotion Agency, and he was in charge of designing and implementing Guinea's private investment promotion policy. And even before that, Mr. Curtis was the Senior Manager, Head of Risk, Capital, and Reporting for Self-Assessment and Prudential Supervision Management for the Europe, Middle East, and Africa regions at the Bank of New York Mellon in London. So throughout his career, he has led projects in the Caribbean and also on the African continent, specifically in Algeria, Benin, Cameroon, Congo, Madagascar, Mali, Rwanda, and Togo. So as you can see, Mr. Curtis has actually the right profile to also talk to us about what the AfCFTA is about. The next in the panel is Mr. Grant. Most of you may have actually met Mr. Grant in the previous sessions of the annual investment meeting. Mr. Grant is the CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center currently, and he was appointed by President Nana Akufo-Addo in February 2017. He's also a renowned Ghanaian investment banker with more than 30 years of experience in banking and finance. He has served in various capacities in corporate finance and advisory, corporate banking and marketing. He also has a broad knowledge and great exposure in the African financial markets. He was responsible for the development and implementation of the AAF SME FAD, one of the largest agriculture SME FADs in sub-Saharan Africa, and also helped achieve their first close of about $30 million. He also serves on the steering board of the World Association of Investment Promotion Associations to represent Africa, and is also a council member of the Continental Business Network of the African Union, which advises African governments on private sector finance and infrastructure. He has served as a consultant on finance and business for the Africa-Asia Business Forum. So as you can see, we have two distinguished, very experienced panelists with us. And the way we are going to proceed with our session today is that I'm going to make a presentation of two publications that the Economic Commission for Africa has worked on that relates to the theme of this annual meeting, that is investments. And then after my presentation, which is going to be for about 20 minutes, I'm going to give the minister and also Mr. Grant an opportunity of a few minutes to respond to some of the issues that they see coming out of my presentation. And then after that, we'll go into a Q&A whereby they will talk about what is happening in their respective countries, that is in Guinea and also in Ghana, and also bring an African perspective, given that this is an Africa session. So if you allow me, I'm going to now share my screen so that I can start my presentation. So my presentation is entitled basically in the same way as our session is entitled, that is Regional Investment Agreements and Investment Drivers in Africa, Shaping Global Investment Strategies through the African Continental Free Trade Area. As you will know, the African Continental Free Trade Area is something that we spoke about in our last session when we met in Dubai. And it's one of the greatest things that is actually happening in our continent today. And we believe that having the African Continental Free Trade Area and starting implementing it as soon as we can is actually going to be beneficial in enabling the African economies recover from the impacts of the pandemic that the world is undergoing today. But for that to happen, of course, we need to attract investments. And so we need to understand what are those things that drive investment in Africa. And our focus in this conversation today is on intra-African investments, because at the end of the day, we want to see an AfCFTA platform in which investments from Guinea, go to Ghana, investors from Ghana come to Ethiopia, and we see them spread across the continent to complement the foreign direct investments also that come from the rest of the world. In addition to that, we would also want to understand, given the AfCFTA, what are some of the things that we have seen under the bilateral investment treaties and the double taxation treaties that African countries have signed, and what does the AfCFTA mean for that? What do we need to do about these bilateral investment treaties and double taxation treaties for the AfCFTA to optimize in terms of attracting investment in the continent? So my presentation is basically about that, concluding by showing why the AfCFTA is a game changer for investment. So as a way of background, I would like to say that back in 2013, the African ministers meeting as African ministers of trade in their 8th session indicated that it was important for the continent to start having serious discussions on investment policy. And in their second meeting as the African Union Ministers of Trade in 2016, in a second meeting that they had in 2016, they basically requested that 2 issues be looked at in details. The first issue is they wanted to have a better understanding of what drives intra-African investment. The rationale of this being that the investments that take place as intra-African investment may not necessarily be the same kind of investments that we see at FDI. The second issue they wanted to understand is the linkages between double taxation treaties and bilateral investment treaties. And with the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which, as you know, was signed in 2018, and we expect to see the start of trading on 1st of January 2021, the member states also agreed to negotiate an investment protocol as a phase 2 issue to encourage investment across the continent. So the 2 issues that the ministers foresaw in 2016 certainly have an implication on what will be the content of the investment protocol. So during this session, I would want to present to you 2 research reports that the ECA has actually produced, and these can actually be found under the UN ECA website, both in English and French. The first one is on the drivers of boosting intra-African investment, and the second one is on the linkages between double taxation treaties and bilateral investment treaties. So I'll quickly take you through what each of these publications is about, and then we will see how to proceed. So when it comes to the issue of investment in Africa, the key takeaway as contained in the report is that Africa's inward FDI flows dropped in 2017. But the most important point to see in terms of the figures that we see here is that Africa continues to form a very small share of the world total of the FDI. It hovers around 3%, and this has been the situation if you look at the chart on the top panel of this slide. You barely see the line that represents Africa. In fact, you don't even see a lot of variability, because if the variability happens in the others, but the share for the continent remains very, very, very small. Now, but there is also another story when it comes to looking at investments in Africa, and that is the intra-African FDI. What we see, and that is the second part of the panel, and looking at it from the Organization of the Regional Economic Communities, intra-African FDI is quite volatile. It tends to vary depending on which is the regional economic community. It actually reaches up to 20% of the gross domestic product in the case of the SADC, or Southern African Development Community, and also for ECOWAS. And I'm happy to note that our 2 discussants from member states of those two of ECOWAS. But if one was to dig deeper, and our report does actually dig a little bit deeper into these numbers, it does actually show most of them are actually driven by a very few countries within the continent. Countries like Nigeria, countries like Egypt, countries like Ethiopia, countries like South Africa. Many other African countries form a very small share, even within their own regional economic communities. So basically, our study wanted to understand better what is it that drives intra-African foreign direct investment. That is investment from one African country to another African country. And in summary, we have two sets of findings in the report. One is the broad findings on what drives intra-African investment as a continent. And then the second set of results is what drives intra-African investments in each of the regional economic community. And I would really encourage viewers to look for these two reports. Now, under the continental level, a trade openness, be it regional trade openness or global trade openness, seems to be a positive driver of FDI, intra-African FDI. And at this point, one could argue that just this finding is a good justification as to why the AfCFTA, which is going to open trade within the continent, is such an important part of boosting intra-African investments. Other factors relate to education. And in fact, one of the key things that we found in our report was actually the importance of focusing on girls' education when it comes to being able to catalyze intra-African FDI. Other factors, which are clearly, I'm sure the two discussants, the minister and the CEO, Grant, can actually be able to say, is cross-border movement, and the business environment is very important. Infrastructure development is also important. But we did also find in our report that importation of industrial goods tends to have a negative implication or a negative relationship with intra-African FDI. So essentially this, if you were to flip that point, was an indication that there is actually need to exploit the industrial potential within the continent. And what our research at ECA has actually shown is that most of the gains on intra-African trade under the AfCFTA are actually going to be driven by manufactured goods. And I think that is validated by the results, the negative relationship that we see here in terms of intra-African FDI and the importation of industrial goods, because it means that the African countries are not currently utilizing the potential that they have. On the right side of the panel are the different factors that drive intra-African FDIs in the different regional economic communities. And as you can see, they do vary depending on the sub-region. So in the case of ECOWAS, the size of the market and inclusive education policy came out as very positive, to have a very significant positive relationship with intra-ECOWAS FDI. And you may want us to compare that with COMESA, where ICT infrastructure and economic growth were the major factors. So what are some of the recommendations that one could come up with from those findings? So at the national level, basically what our report urges is that it is important to promote priority investment sectors, including manufacturing, so that we can harness the benefits of industrial trade, need to invest in training and vocational programs, given the positive link that we see between education and FDI, and also the need to improve business environment, regulations, and macro stability, because these are key to attracting intra-African investment. Of course, at the international level, our report does actually point to the importance of the complementarity between trade and investment. And like I have just mentioned, it clearly shows there is room and scope and the rationale and justification why it's important to leverage the AfCFTA to boost intra-African investment flows. The second point that I would want to point at this level is the need to complement the AfCFTA with investment regulations to unlock the joint benefits of trade and investment, and of course, take advantage of the transboundary investment opportunities. So those are the issues that come out of the first publication. Now, the second publication, which looks at the linkages between bilateral investment treaties and double taxation treaties, it may look different from what I've just mentioned. But if one was to think carefully in terms of theory and also in terms of practice, one would actually be able to see that what drives investment, and especially the intra-African FDI, does actually have a relationship with the kind of policy, the kind of regulatory regime that in most cases is determined by the content of the bilateral investment treaties that the African countries have, and also the kind of double taxation treaties that they have signed. So if you allow me quickly just to give a highlight on this publication. So on the bilateral investment treaties, Africa has, as of 2017, there were more than 850 bilateral treaties, bilateral investment treaties that Africa had signed. More than 500 of those were actually in force. About 150 of them were actually between African countries, that is one African country with another African country. Now, then in the area of the double taxation treaties, we had about 450 double taxation treaties in which the African countries had actually signed. And while most of those treaties are with the rest of the world, African countries, non-African countries, we do also have double taxation treaties among African countries. Now, I don't have to belabor the point that the main reason why we have these bilateral investment treaties in the first place is to make sure that investments are protected. But one of the key issues that has always arisen is that once you sign the investment treaty, what happens going forward if the landscape changes and the government needs to legislate for one reason or the other, maybe because of an economic reason and also because of a social reason. And then it turns out that the articles in the bilateral investment treaty raises grounds for an objection by the investor because of what the new law might have on their investments. So there is that question, of course, that always arises. And then when it comes to the double taxation treaties, as we know, it does actually deal with the issue of ensuring that businesses do not pay taxes twice, but also that tends also to have an implication on the tax take of the host country, and especially if it turns out that the partner country has a lower tax regime. And as all of us would know, some of the foregone revenue because of these double taxation treaties do have on the ability to spend under the policy that you need in the area of education or in the infrastructure development so that the logistics can be better or build industrial capacity. So there is a direct link between these bits and the DTTs and what we just discussed about how to attract FDI. But as we can see, these are things that are very prevalent in the African continent, and the AfCFTA, there is an implication for the AfCFTA on those. I think basically this slide does, and this is discussed in detail in our report, basically summarizes what I've just said about the delicate balance that countries have to take when they are signing bilateral investment treaties and the double taxation treaties. And given that the economic environment, the global economic environment keeps changing, and also the investment in continent is also changing. So there is a question whether the bilateral investment treaties as we have them now, are they constraining policy space? Is the arbitration that is contained or that is foreseen in them inconsistent? And is Africa vulnerable to bias? And I think our report does actually give several examples on these issues. Now, when it comes to the double taxation treaties, the report does argue we could even have situation of the facilitation of tax avoidance, which, as we know, when it comes to financing development, is something that we cannot actually ignore. So the report does raise the question, what needs to change in these two regimes now that as a continent, we are in the process of creating one large market that is through the African Continental Free Trade Area, where we have an investment protocol that investment area. So out of the analysis of the double taxation treaties and the bilateral investment treaties, several recommendations did actually come up in our report. Under the national level, there is a recommendation of the need to review the existing investment and tax treaties to identify those areas that are likely to be problematic because governments need to change their policies as things move along. There is also the need to align and define a common approach among ministries in charge of investment and tax treaties. It's not always the case that the two lie in the same ministries. And it's also important to build capacity of domestic institutions to serve investors, and especially to stem illicit financial flows, which is an area that is actually very prevalent under the two areas. At the international level, the report does actually highlight the need why it's important to take advantage of the AfCFTA negotiations to rationalize the existing treaties and also establish a common approach to bilateral investment treaties and double taxation treaties in the case of Africa, and also why it's important to speak with one voice and also engage actively in the international investment and tax reform debate that are ongoing. All of us are aware that this week there was a lot of conversation about the tax reforms at the global level, and we also know about the international investment agreements reforms that are ongoing. So broadly, there is an opportunity to use the planned AfCFTA investment protocol as a baseline in the negotiations with the external partners. Now, having given those two publications which we have concluded, I would just want to bring to the attention of the viewers that we are at an advanced stage of developing and preparing another application that is entitled towards a common investment area in the African Continental Free Trade Area, leveling the playing field of intra-African investment. And this publication is informed to a great extent, but what we have found out in the other two publications, but much more importantly, this publication is trying to draw out the linkages that exist between investment, competition policy, intellectual property, and digitalization. You will agree with me that these issues that are going to form the basis of the AfCFTA phase 2 negotiations and phase 3, that is in the area of e-commerce, are very critical to the ability of the continent to leverage the opportunities for greater intra-African investment and also FDI. So our report will be dealing with this, and maybe during this session, it will be important to hear how to tease out some of these issues. Now, so for our discussion today, and I think I have mentioned this so far, what I have discussed is important for the having shared evidence-based findings from those our analysis. There are some important considerations on the AfCFTA, which I have, as we have stated, and all of us now Continental seem to agree, is going to be a game changer. African countries can actually surmount a number of policy and regulatory challenges, be it those that are posed by the bilateral investment treaties and the double taxation treaties through the AfCFTA. And obviously, we believe this will be critical to attracting greater investment, deepening intra-African investment, including also attracting FDI from the from the non-African countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the two publications that this year would want to take the opportunities of this session to present to you. And if you allow me now, I'm going to transit to my role as the moderator of the session. And what I'm going to do is basically actually to give the minister and also the CEO for Ghana Investment Promotion Center an opportunity to, first of all, react to what I've just said. And so I will give the floor, if you allow me, Mr. Grant, for protocol reasons, to our minister, knowing that I work for the United Nations. So, Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much for two very interesting presentations. I think we learned a lot, and there are lessons in there that we'll take on board as we are shaping policies. I want to say also hello to Mr. Grant that I know, that I've met on a number of occasions. We used to meet when we used to have these conferences in person. So we used to meet on several occasions, and I would like to say hello to him. A very good man. I thought these were extremely important reports, and he touched on our region, which is ECOWAS. Indeed, inter-African trade is very volatile. But I had a couple of questions. I don't know if there's a specific format. It does seem like we have, I mean, at least on our region, in ECOWAS, there must be some unrecorded data, because there's a lot of intra-country trade that is not recorded. As you know, the quality of the statistics are low. And I know in the border areas, in the border regions, let's say just Guinea and Ivory Coast and Liberia, there's a lot of trade that goes unrecorded, because we have population that actually lives on both sides of the border. Same thing for us with with Senegal, but I'm sure the same thing also happens with Benin and Nigeria. There's a lot of trade there, but a lot of it is unrecorded. Or when you take Togo and Ghana, the trade that's unreported. So that's one thing that I wanted to know if you've considered it and kind of evaluated it, because I do believe that oftentimes we underreport what is actually happening, because most of our economies are informal. The second item was around trade openness. So we've had some sort of trade openness for a very long time, but we do notice that there are some non-tariff barriers that are preventing trade flows to be greater than what they are today. So wanted to see what is your opinion on that. On the manufacturing of goods, you are absolutely correct. I think it is something that we definitely need to be to focus on, especially with what's happening in China, where they're being less and less competitive. So the next market will be here, so we could bring in the manufacturing. We can increase manufacturing capacity. I've seen over your development bank report saying that the continent is less industrialized today than it was in the 70s. And I guess there are several issues pertaining to that. I guess one of the things is access to cheap electricity, which is one of the things that the President of the Republic of Guinea, our government, has focused on by multiplying by 10 our production of electricity at a low cost with hydroelectricity. The other item is, and you've touched on it, is logistics and transport. I think it's something that we don't necessarily, that has to be really high up on the pecking order. People need to be able to communicate, and they need to be able to move easily. I mean, to leave here and to go to I don't know, to on issues. Since Air Afrique disappeared, I don't know if we've really ever evaluated the impact of Air Afrique disappearing, because it has absolutely had a detrimental effect on trade and between the different countries. On the second report, double taxation, it's very interesting that you presented, because we are oftentimes hassled by our partners. Take for example, for Guinea, we trading more and more with Turkey. We went from 8 million, I think, back in 2016, and in 2019, in terms of trade flows, we are at 200 million. Actually, pushing for us to have the benefit, it will benefit us, because they have more of their companies operating here. So I think that's a very interesting report that I think we could take, we could study to see, like, what are really the impacts of these double taxation treaties. One thing that ECOWAS had started, but we never got far, is that we have the same, we have OHADA, which is the same, and this is working fine. It's through the same investment code for all of ECOWAS countries, and eventually for all African countries. I think that's something that needs to be, we really need to explore that, because if we have the same investment code like we have the same business law, that kind of level the playing field, and we will not be giving out, we will not be competing downwards. So that's something that maybe we should be looking into. In terms of e-commerce, I think that's the way of the future. In Guinea, we are working on updating our R&D and innovation policies, and one of our key goals is to develop e-commerce, but we go beyond e-commerce. We do mobile commerce, because e-commerce, I know for us it implies having access to internet, going online and everything. But if we can do it, because we see what's happening with the mobile money, so really developing that it's something that we could develop better. So I don't want to take too much of the time, but I do agree that the AfCFTA is really a game changer, and it can have a positive impact on the continent as a whole, and in the development of our different countries. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Minister Curtis. I think we can come back to Mr. Grant to first of all have his first reaction. And then what I will do is, before we transit to the Q&A, I'm going to sort of provide a 1 or 2 minute summary of what I take from your reactions. So Mr. Grant, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for inviting me here. De mon frère Gabriel, salut, good morning. He's an old good friend, a very good man as well. And to all those on listening to this, greetings where you are, if it's morning or afternoon. Indeed, I think that these two studies couldn't have come at a better time. I dare say that the continent itself has a unique opportunity post-COVID to reboot and reposition itself as a player in the global economy. And I even look beyond the intra to how best we can actually optimize Africa's opportunity by working together. Indeed, Minister Curtis has he virtually picked my brain on a lot of the comments that he made, but I will not sort of re-echo them. I'll go on to other issues that have come up as I listened to your presentation, Stephen, and also fully endorse and totally agree with, because I had virtually the same thing listed as I was listening. But let me just maybe veer off gradually into another part of it, which I would think should sort of form the discussion on what are the investment drivers on the continent. And what is the big opportunity? And I keep saying that the year 2020 ushered in Africa's big opportunity. And this is, I think, Africa's decade. Firstly, because of one thing, Africa still houses quite a significant amount of the world's remaining resources, which will reboot growth. And this has become even more poignant and more important post-COVID, where a lot of economies need to get back in track after the ravaging pandemic, and therefore need to reset. And Africa holds the key to that. Secondly, Africa also, and it's estimated that by 2050, Africa will be 1/4 of the world's population. And in that population, a good 60% would be below the age of 35. So that is a major challenge, but also a major opportunity, which is informing where the continent is far behind. Because as the statistics say, over the past few years, out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 6 are from Africa. So obviously we are repositioning to take advantage of that. And Africa continues to be one of the fastest growing economies in the world, or fastest growing areas in the world. Most of our governments are working on macro and bringing improved macroeconomic foundations, like reduced inflation, reduced debt, reduced budget deficits, and but there's still quite a bit of room to go. And it was interesting when Minister Curtis spoke about traveling to Gabon, that it's easier to go to Paris and fly down to Guinea. And it's almost all throughout the continent. And indeed, my disappointment is the recent, I don't know that to say, or probably collapse of South African Airways, which connected the South and the North and the mid parts of Africa. And I hope that the other regional airlines will survive whatever has happened post-COVID to be able to connect the continent better. Because connectivity is the main key to trade. And if we can't connect within the continent, it makes it very difficult for us to trade internally. And that is why intra-Africa trade is still somewhere around 18%. But if you look at the EU, it's around 65%, because they can move and connect. And intra-Africa investment is even much less. I think we are talking somewhere around perhaps below 5%. And it's because we cannot connect, and although there are 4 major regional blocks, we still don't talk. And that is why there are very strong efforts, at least within ECOWAS, to harmonize our investment codes to ensure that we can connect first on the policy and then also open up ourselves to engage. Because until we do that, then it becomes a mirage. We'll all say the right things, but do the wrong things. Let me just quickly go through some of the investment drivers that I have listed, which I believe we should look at. And probably you might have looked at in the studies, but need to come out very clearly. It's obvious that one of the biggest things that a country requires for investment is stability. And so that is key in itself, to the extent that right now we are seeing a lot less coup d'etats and all that, and we hope the last one we saw should be the last we should see on the continent. But when those things happen, then they frighten investors, whether within the continent or outside the continent. And therefore, as governments, we need to really put in the action to end armed conflicts on the continent, because there are still some parts of the continent where there's armed conflicts. And that those few bad nuts spoil it for everybody. So those are very important. And as to whether the continent will take a collective responsibility or leave it to governments is one that we should clearly investigate. I believe that if the continent takes it as one collective body, we would have faster results, as we've just realized from Mali, where ECOWAS stepped in and has sort of calmed nerves and put the country back into constitutional government. Of course, I mean, without saying, macroeconomic conditions for investments and practical reforms are important to create better business climates in our countries, and those are very important. And I'm sure you must have heard recently that even in Ghana there were problems in the retail trade sector, where real fight between indigenous traders and foreign retail traders, because there was a law that actually had an exclusive list, but also indicated that foreigners cannot engage in retail trade unless they invest $1 million and employ 20 people. So all those things brought problems. But as my good friend Gabriel said, I mean, West Africa is very homogeneous. You find Ghanaians in Nigeria, and for those relationships. As we get to start refining our growth strategies, we realize that we come in conflict with some of these sociocultural developments that have happened over the decades. And it's important then that as we all converge into AfCFTA, we also investigate and interrogate these issues of culture and how we can rather use them for good, where Nigeria closed its doors for very pertinent reasons, but that had a major impact on trade in ECOWAS, because there were Nigerian traders who were caught in Nigeria, couldn't come out of Nigeria to sell their goods in the sub-region, and there were trucks on the other side of the border waiting to enter Nigeria that couldn't. And it was because of various reasons, smuggling Nigerians to build its rice industry, and yet they had more rice imported across the borders than they themselves had thought of, which collapsed their local industry. And so these are some of the things that within the continent itself we need to look at. And then, of course, incentive structures. And I believe that most countries are looking at reforms in investment climate. And if we are not careful, Africa will undersell in this bid to attract investments, because everybody wants to remove and give as many incentives as possible, which impact on revenues, government revenues, significantly impact on government revenues. And so we need to be very careful that we price right. And that is why standardization across the continent becomes very important. Because then if we have one harmonized investment code, these are some of the things that we can really work with. Then, of course, I've already mentioned access to markets. I mean, it's very difficult to travel within the continent itself. And until we are able to really endorse and operationalize policies that we've all signed to, I think that we may be running very fast, but not to anywhere. So we need to do that. And then, of course, we need to also ensure that we have stronger financial sectors and robust banking sectors, which can support business across the region. And we need to, when we started talking, I quickly tried to search how many African banks are operating within the continent beyond their regions or beyond their home countries, and I didn't see many. And in West Africa, of course, we do have ECOWAS, we have EcoBank, which has become a regional bank, and we have quite a number of big Nigerian banks that are operating across the region. I think that's a good start, but we need to also harmonize all those rules to ensure that these banks can operate in each other's countries and state trade and investment. Then, in Ghana, we have clearly endorsed an e-government strategy where government is digitalizing, and that is first to improve the engagement between the citizenry and government, but I believe effectively it will also improve communications and connectivity within the continent. And it will be good to elevate that whole discussion further up, such that once again have a common platform that came up was that even as Africans, we don't own our own data. It's very easy for somebody to find out about me from Google or whichever platform there is. In fact, we always all run to Google and Yahoo and all this is when you're looking for stuff, even within the continent. And if I want something on the continent, or whether in Cote d'Ivoire, whether you have difficulties. We do not have that the access to our own data, so we can't commonize it as much as we want. Then, of course, I mean, for me, the most important thing that I think has been captured is the investment policies of the continent. And as we are all going to negotiation stage at CFTA, it's important that we understand that opening up to ourselves will really open up the economies and be of ourselves and closing up. The search for investment. So we do try to outcompete each other. But I think within the continent, if we rather facilitate and enhance our investment policies such that we can easily invest and trade with us, it will be for the betterment of the continent.
So thank you very much, Mr. Curtis and Grant. I think we are having a slight hitch in terms of the network from Mr. Grant's side, if I'm not mistaken. But he was coming to the end of the points that he wanted to make in terms of the investment drivers. So before I ask the past.
Just in 2 minutes, quickly.
Okay, great.
I mean, African risk was perceived to be extremely high. And for that reason, I mean, anytime that African countries went for debt or went for everything, it was at a major risk premium. Some maybe 6 to 8 basis points, 800 basis points above what you'd find within the global community. And yet, the statistics and the history does not necessarily, well, the history may have facilitated the situation in America. Africa performs much better. And so that whole idea of the premium should not be as it is. And that is a difficulty that we face as a continent that we need to look at. Because once we are able to do that, then we can have even investment on the continent, for the continent, and within the continent. And then lastly, I think that we should all carefully beyond aid and the people. We should use our own resources, our own people to develop the continent. Africa as a continent is very wealthy. It has over 30% of the world's remaining mineral resources. And yet, the people are poor. Africa has everything that it requires to build a solid economy, yet we are import dependent. And it's about time that we added value to our own resources. And that is why manufacturing comes high on the list of the investment opportunities. I think I'll end there and then wait for the questions, and then we can discuss further.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I was basically saying that both of you have actually given us so much in terms of the reaction to what has been presented. And interestingly, in your response, you have also responded to some of the points that the minister had raised as to those things that are impacting intra-African trade and also intra-African investments. I like reminding of that trade and investments are two sides of the same coin. The things that drive intra-African trade also have an implication on intra-African investment are so related. So I like the point you make that COVID-19 gives Africa an opportunity to reset, opportunity to reposition, and an opportunity to revolt. I like that point because as our report shows, we are here creating the AfCFTA. I have listened to what the minister and yourself see as the issues that are impacting you, basically acting intra-African trade and intra-African investments. The AfCFTA gives us a platform for that rebooting, including when it comes to emphasizing on manufacturing. But I think the key thing that both of you have talked about, you've talked about the investment code in West Africa, and you have also talked about why it's important to have a Pan-African investment code, and the AfCFTA is about that. And our report addresses, or at least raises, the issues that needs to be addressed in coming up with that investment code. But I think let us bring things a little bit closer home. And what I was going to do is to ask the minister that, I mean, you've talked about technology. Even before I asked the question, you raised the issue of technology. You talked about the issue of research and development. And even in your thinking, when it comes to the question of e-commerce, you want to have a concept of mobile commerce. So the question that I have for you, Minister, is sustainable digital infrastructure is seen as a prerequisite for Africa to harness the benefits of digital ID and also digital identity rather, and digital trade. And there are several initiatives that are there to support Africa's digitalization. Examples here include the African Development Bank's Connect Africa initiative. We also have the World Bank's Digital Moonshot. And more recently, early this year, the African president endorsed the African Union Digital Transformation Strategy. So what, in your view, Minister, are the major challenges for a country such as Guinea to bridge the digital divide? And how may your country benefit from the AfCFTA? How may your country benefit from this AfCFTA? How can this be brought about to achieve the Industrial Revolution 4.0, which all of us agree is important and is here already with us, Minister?
Well, thank you very much. I think you've touched on a very important subject because you, as an aside, what we're seeing even in more developed countries, the issues that they are facing can be linked to the change of the economic model. Because you can see the divide between those that have adapted to the new economic model and those that have not. We have a chance in Africa that we don't have to replace anything because we're still in the development stage. So we can adapt. We can adapt to the new economic model here, and that is based on the digital economy. Electricity, because we have energy in our cities, but it needs to be available everywhere, because without electricity, we cannot have anything. We cannot develop the digital economy. We also have in Guinea, for example, the past 6 years, internet has increased 600-fold. Just to tell you, like how the market there really is a market of that. We also need to be ready for the emergence of new jobs because it requires to have capacity to be able to develop our own, not only our own infrastructure, but also our own strategy in terms of information technology. Mr. Grant mentioned earlier that we don't own our data. We don't have data centers. We have to go through outside the continent for our data. So that's something that is really absolutely important. For the benefit of AfCFTA to achieve the Industrial Revolution 4.0, I think this is going to really increase and ease the cooperation to foster the digital transformation of African societies. And Guinea is already collaborating with Smart Africa of Rwanda on the topic of smart cities and also the e-learning platform, African Cloud. So these initiatives are extremely important. We also have the regional with the surrounding countries, the 6 surrounding countries of Guinea, direct linkages or through the Americas to be able to connect to discuss to connect within ourselves. So we really salute the Smart Africa initiative. Also, what is going to happen? It's going to enable us to pool our resources. Can achieve if we can pool our resources, and we can achieve economic diversification, more export competitiveness, high productivity and technology upgrading. And then, digital literacy is also very important. We support, I think the African Union Agenda 2063, they set a target of 30% of high school graduate entering tertiary education in science and technology related subject. So I think that is really something that we need to improve that, and we're working towards it. Here in Guinea, our policy, then we're enacting new policies for R&D and innovation. So 1% of our budget will be devoted to R&D and innovation. That's going to be enacted starting next year. We also are working towards fostering the creation of about 1,000 startups. So that's also some of the initiatives that we have. And our policy is going to be focused on 5 elements. In terms of a digital economy, agriculture, because there's a lot that can be done with agriculture, on agriculture with precision agriculture and all of these things. Health, mobility. Again, we reinforce on mobility because we believe it's going to be key to our economic development. Mobile money, so e-money, and as well as and the fifth one is we talked about it is e-commerce, but we talking about and mobile commerce. So those are the areas that we are really focusing on, and we believe that AfCFTA is going to open up, is opening up the continent. It is opening us up. It's going to provide new markets for us, and using the digital economy is going to enable, let's say, a trader that's selling plantains. So that trader can sell the plantains to someone in Mali or Burkina Faso, because they will have the mobile. And if we have the logistics and the transportation that goes along with it, we can trace the truck that leaving where the produce is to where it's going. That's going to enable us, and if you have the capacity also to be able to trade and to pay over the phone between the different countries, that's really going to enable us to improve trade and investments across our countries, and that can be said for all of the continent.
Oh, thank you so much, Minister. I would have wanted to immediately follow up on some of the things that you have said, but I think I want to quickly pose a question to Mr. Grant. So, Mr. Grant, you actually are the one who started us on this idea of rebooting our economies, or at least rebooting for Africa. And the minister seems to suggest the same by saying that Africa needs a new economic model, which basically digitalization is at the heart of that. We need to come up with new strategies, and we have to harness the energy which we seem to have, but we have not harnessed it well. So for you, Mr. Grant, can the creation of a wider economic space under the African Continental Free Trade Area enable African countries to leapfrog, which are some of the things that seem wrong, and skip some of the traditional steps of economic development as we have seen them, for instance, in the area of mobile payments, such as M-Pesa and what you have in Ghana. What are the opportunities and what are the pitfalls for the data in it being able to play in this space?
First and foremost, absolutely. I think that the bigger regional body would definitely enable us leapfrog quite a lot of the barriers that we have. I mean, first of all, I mean, a lot of country economies are not strong enough on their own to take on the global trade platforms. But so in terms of numbers, and bear in mind, the AfCFTA will be the largest trading bloc since the WTO. And even as now we speak, we are praying and hopeful that the head of the WTO will be at Africa's real global scale. But yes, there are still issues that we need to resolve to ensure that we optimize these newfound relationships, which we need to really glue together to become the new economy of the world going forward. And I did say that this is our opportunity to reboot. And Minister Curtis made quite a lot of important, very important points. For example, even the infrastructure challenges in technology across the continent could be a barrier. And to the extent that the cost of deployment is a major investment opportunity that the continent needs to try and unravel and take advantage of to bring in needed investment to ensure that that happens. But having said that, I will go back to something that must have been in the works, but somehow should drive the new process of getting the standard investment code for Africa under the AfCFTA. If you would remember very well, there was the Pan-African Investment Code, PAIC, which was actually set up by the AU in 2008. And it was all in the bid to enhance economic integration. And the efforts or the intentions was to come up with one investment code for Africa called the Pan-African Investment Code. And development of each member state. And so I think that as once again, this comes back to the table because as you did say, trade and investments are the sides of one coin. And Africa must certainly be looking at investment for trade bigger than ever before. But in coming up with that, we also recognize that, as the report shows, that a number of African countries have BITs and DTTs, which are not necessarily in consonance with each other. And so even as we look forward to a harmonized and uniform investment code, we should be able to rally into them, the BITs and the DTTs, to ensure that there are no conflicts. And I do agree that countries sign bilateral investment treaties to facilitate specific relationships that they do have. But to the extent that we need to optimize the opportunity of the African market, we all need to take a step back and ensure that our BITs and DITs harmonize into a uniform investment code, which would augur well for all of us. If you look at the history, most BITs in Africa were signed in the 90s and early 2000s. And there are, I think, as I saw in the report, 870 BITs in our continent. And they were done mostly under regional economic communities in Africa. But even as we speak, there are problems between countries in the regional blocks. And I've just highlighted one, Ghana and Nigeria on a retail trade. And so we need to take a step back and see how we can all work towards one objective of optimizing our economies. And I believe that although we all are at different levels of economic development and have different, should I say, investment plans and economic development plans, we can better harmonize for mutual benefit, which may augur well. And I will use the usual example we use in investments, that owning 100% of zero can never be better than owning 20% of a billion. And so for me, that is the direction which I come from. That I certainly believe that if we can actually have an intra-African investment code that replaces the existing 171 intra-African BITs with one single treaty, it will work better for us and to regulate intra-African investments. I think recent EU agreements with third parties have also included a provision noting that upon entry into force of a new agreement, the BITs between parties, including the rights and obligations derived therefrom, will cease to have effect and shall be replaced and superseded by a new agreement. And we need to endorse same for the CFTA, that we should have a single agreement which should then supersede some of what we've had there. Otherwise, a lot of what we've been doing will become talk. And once we regionalize, we need to harmonize and standardize such that we all mutually benefit from it. And therefore, for me, I think that the harmonization and standardization, even at the investment code should resolve many of the problems. I believe that it would of us, and each individual country will benefit accordingly, and agree that that is the way that Africa should go. But if we still focus on our individual BITs and DTTs, we are going to have severe difficulties in negotiating our trade positions as a continent. So I think these would be my immediate answer to some of the challenges that are there.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Grant, because I think we all seem to agree that the investment protocol for the AfCFTA is going to be very, very, very important. And I think you also make it clear that the investment code, the PIKE, as we call it, forms a good basis to inform how we should go about that. And the anticipation is that under the AfCFTA investment protocol, just with the stroke of a pen, we will be able to deal with all these intra-African BITs. And then, of course, based on the investment protocol, countries will also be better informed on how to deal with the renewal or the revocation, if it's possible, for the BITs that they have with other countries. Given that,
perhaps Stephen, I should also make mention that even as we speak, at the WEF level, there is and at the WT level, more so than the WEF level, because WEF is just a facilitator in that sense. There is a move to harmonize investment facilitation and have all members of the WTO sign onto it to ensure that we actually optimize the investment opportunity. And I think that would also eliminate some of the biases, the regional biases that we have, that Africa has suffered for the longest region. So I just wanted to also add that point.
No, actually, that's a very good point, because the investment protocol is not just about investment. It's going to go beyond investment promotion to also talk about investment facilitation, and also, of course, how to deal with the dispute mechanism. So thank you very much for bringing up that point. So I was going to come back to you, Minister, and press you a little bit more on the preparedness of Guinea in playing in this new digital arena. And I was going to say that we agree that digitalization is shaping today's global economic relations. And as we were developing the digital transformation strategy with our friends in the African Union Commission, some of the statistics we have there is that the digital economy in Africa is expected to grow to over 300 billion in the next 5 years, by 2025. And this is supposed to happen on the back of massive mobile penetration among other technologies. And I think we have heard about the technologies of 5G and everything that goes with 5G. Now, many countries, including Guinea, as we have heard from you, are embracing e-commerce, and you are pushing the bar towards mobile commerce. And the pandemic has actually accelerated most of our countries towards adopting these new technologies and having policies that promote it. So my question to you is, to what extent is Guinea digitally prepared to take advantage of the benefits and gains of e-commerce by attracting greater investment in the digital sectors? And how may an e-commerce protocol in the AfCFTA support this? I think this is a direct question. Maybe one of your citizens could be asking you, Minister, how well prepared are you in taking advantage of the benefits and gains of e-commerce? And what's your view about an e-commerce protocol in the AfCFTA? And how can that be support? How can that protocol support where you are?
I have to say that we are in favor of an e-commerce protocol, because I do believe that a standardization, harmonization across the continent is absolutely key. So to enable us to really pool our different resources for the new digital economy. I have to say that the mobile penetration is, like elsewhere in Africa, is very high in Guinea. It now stands at 102%. So we have mobile penetration everywhere. Everyone has a mobile. However, in order to really foster the e-commerce, mobile commerce, you need to have smartphones. And our smartphones penetration is about 30%. And the internet penetration is about between 35 and 40% in terms of reliability. So, but we sense that Guinean consumers today are really starved for digital solutions, to really ease their daily lives. Like you see in the rise of mobile money, payment services, delivery apps. We have a lot of delivery apps like for cabs and for food. So we have these delivery apps, and then e-commerce platforms, some of it via social media. But we do need to really develop our own solutions that respond to the needs, the specific needs of the country. So the Guinean government has reviewed the policies and created new entities to attract more investment in the digital sector. We have GILAB, that's Guinean for Guinea Large Bande Passante. That's for internet provider, is an internet provider. So the ACE cable that came to Guinea is managed through GILAB, so to have all the infrastructure in terms of the cable. We have SOGEB, that's to get, we've built more than 4,000 kilometers of fiber optics wires throughout the countries, so to connect every localities in the country. We also have a new innovation policy and a startup act that it's in the works. It should be going to Parliament soon. We have several projects currently underway, including the creation of a data center and acquisition of a second submarine fiber cable that will further accelerate the country's digital transformation, and thus easing the promotion of e and mobile commerce. And we also want, the context of a COVID-19 pandemic, as you can see, even right now, I'm not in Conakry, by the way. I'm in my village because we're campaigning currently. So you can see I'm in my village, about 160 kilometers from Conakry, and we are communicating. So you can see that we've realized even more so that we need to have digital connectivity. So it is absolutely important to improve it and increase it. So the reliance on e-commerce is more important than ever. We realized that in Africa, there's 260 e-commerce startups that were operating between 2017 and 2020. So that's not enough. So we have to increase in terms of the startups. So the government has put in place a real policy to encourage, with the Startup Act, to really encourage and foster startups that are in the digital economy. Currently, we have 24 startups that are more or less operating in Guinea, and we will be bringing more support to them in terms of really providing them with incentives and direct subsidies. So for the e-commerce protocol in the AfCFTA, I think you would definitely support our efforts and all the African government's effort, but we need to set a good legal and policy framework via the regulation on data localization, cross-border data flows, consumer protection, information protection, which is absolutely key, because the new value, the new currency with the new economy is data. So we need to be able to protect that. Prohibition of customs duty. We need to have more policy to promote and mobile commerce. And typically we notice that there are four main categories used to organize these issues. Market access, in terms of custom duties, digital products, non-discrimination for electronic and digital products, cross-border flows, rules and regulations. I talked about it: consumer protection, protection of personal information, electronic supply of information, the domestic electronic transaction framework, facilitation. We need a paperless trade administration, cooperation, transparency, electronic authentication, and the enabling issues, which is the technology infrastructure and related matters. So I think the protocol could really help us in terms of aligning all the views of the different countries across the continent so that to remove barriers that they can exist. Because if you have e-barriers, they're even harder than physical barriers, because the e-barriers, you cannot go beyond them. If someone decides to block all the communication from your country to theirs, it's easier than you cannot seal off a border. You can do whatever you want. You cannot seal off the border between Guinea and Mali, 600 kilometers. It's just not possible. But you can seal off an e-border because it's technology driven. So there really is a need to have an important instrument for coordination of electronic channels and access to market information, and as well as logistics, payments, trade facilitation, and other components. And that would greatly help us liberalize the intra-African trade.
Thank you so much, Minister. So obviously this is the annual investment meeting, and obviously they are investors. The reason why we have this is so that those scouting for opportunities within Africa and from outside Africa get an opportunity for this. And I think you have laid out the ground that you are actually digitally ready for anyone who wants to come and take advantage of the opportunities of digital economy in Guinea. But I was actually wondering, how far is your rural area from Conakry? Just to get a sense.
160 kilometers.
160 kilometers, because
160.
Because the connection is coming in very well. So
it is.
The citizens
actually
there are enjoying exactly the kind of speeds that you have. This is quite encouraging. So thank you very much. So, Mr. Grant,
Yes.
let me come back to you. And basically what we did on this particular one, we actually looked at what is happening in Ghana and looked at one of your business newspapers. It's called the Business 24 Online. And basically, the analysis that we have done on the AfCFTA has actually been showcased in that paper. And basically what our analysis show is that there are going to be positive benefits for Ghana, leave alone the fact that you have the AfCFTA Secretariat. And we are so proud of you. I think there was no better position for the Secretariat, remembering Kwame Nkrumah. So our results show that there's going to be an increase in terms of your GDP, also in terms of the exports for Ghana from the AfCFTA. And just as we come towards the close of this session, what do you think is essential for Ghana to capitalize on the expected gains from the CFTA? And your response, hopefully you can give it to us from a private sector perspective, because President Nana Akufo knows exactly what he's looking for from a government perspective, and I think he's already delivering a lot on that. But for you, from a private sector perspective, who are your major clients, what do you think is essential for you to really optimize on the benefits of the AfCFTA?
I think from that viewpoint, there are two critical things that are essential. And the first one I'll call is reform. Reform of the existing business practices and business regulations. In fact, we do have a program called the Business Regulatory Reform Program that is being spearheaded by the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and is to look at all the business regulatory laws and see whether they are facilitatory or they are, preventive. And using the guillotine approach, we are getting progressively towards opening some of them. And I do admit that some of them are difficult, especially for the political economy. And I clearly identify with my friend Gabriel, because we are also in campaign mode. But when you're in campaign mode, that you should be careful about reforms, because when some of the people do not understand the reforms, they do not agree with them, it could negatively impact you. But I think the intentions are very well positioned to ensure that the opportunity is created. Now, beyond that, even our investment reforms which we're engaging, we've had to sort of hold back because we wanted to make sure that there was this consonance and conformity with the regional thinking and with the PIAC-like structure and all that before we come out with a reform, so that we are not in conflict. But for the private sector person, I guess all these things are very important, because even if there's an opportunity and your business regulatory environment or ecosystem makes it prohibitive and doesn't facilitate fast-track execution of businesses, it becomes a difficult opportunity. So for us, those are critical for opening the doors for the private sector, but also engagement. And we have a once a quarter private sector consultative meeting with the president, where he meets the captains of industry and some taken from the SMEs and SMIs for breakfast. And it's almost a whole day affair where there's direct engagement to ensure that the private sector is on track with policy formulation and that the policies that come out actually facilitate private sector growth. Because we have made it very clear from our economic policies that the private sector needs to be energized and supported to actually grow the economy. The private sector is much better at creating jobs and creating wealth than government is. And so we are very clear on that. And on most of the policies that we've engaged over the past 3 years of the current government of President Nana Akufo-Addo are to increase business, increase investment, increase businesses, increase jobs, and then enable government to collect its taxes and grow the economy by financing the other bits of infrastructure that the private sector cannot directly engage in. So almost every transaction in Ghana has an opening for the private sector. Additionally, we also are endorsing, in fact, two of our outstanding motivations for the new policy direction is SDG 1 and SDG 17. And by the way, Ghana is probably the first country to benchmark its achievement of the SDGs to its budgetary process at the Ministry of Finance. So almost every development issue is benchmarked to achievement of an SDGs. And so we are on that track of making sure that we are all on the same track and going to the same direction by opening up the economy for the private sector to execute. Now, the truth of the matter is that we think that Ghana is a resource-rich country. And on the basis of that was the formation of the Ghana Beyond Aid. But beyond that was the view by the president that Africa has all the resources and we should be able to add value to those resources on the continent by empowering our private sector. And so if we have more than 30% of the world's resources, there's absolutely no reason, and we have the people and we have the energy, there's absolutely no reason why we can't do the whole full value chain development on the continent if we embrace technology, as Ambassador Curtis has said. But as it is right now, we export our raw commodities and import the finished goods. And therefore we lose out on the higher end of the value chain. And that does not augur well for the African continental development. And so for us, the issue is reform the environments, the business environment and the investment climate to ensure that the private sector is given the space, is given the support to be able to actually be an active partner in economic development and not just leave it for governments.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Grant. Now, I've been reading the articles of Minister Ken in the Financial Times, including the one that I think he wrote over the weekend. So I see what is happening in Ghana. I have listened very carefully what Minister Curtis, what is happening in Guinea. And this is very exciting. We sit at Addis Ababa, look at all the continents, and I can say that quite a good number of African countries are working so hard to go back to the first points that you made, that we no longer have all these coups and things like that. Everybody seems to be doing as much as they can to reduce the political risk. The idea of Ghana Beyond Aid becoming Africa Beyond Aid, I think it's also a very interesting perspective. And I think the private sector is critical to us moving beyond aid, because the private sector is critical in the financing of our development, and they can generate sufficient domestic resources to deal with the gaps that we don't want to see that are driven by aid. So let me thank you, both of you, so much for creating time to be with us here. Now, I know how important it is for you to be engaging with the citizens now. In Kenya, we call them Mwananchi. I know how important it is for you, Minister, to be talking to your constituents in the restaurants, in the farm. And so thank you so much for creating time for that. Yet the reason why you are there is to create and attract investment from the rest of Africa and from the rest of the world, so that they can actually actualize their dreams. And thank you for sharing your views and your insights on this. And we look forward to the rest of the African member states and citizens getting insights from what you have said during this program. So let me thank our co-hosts from the annual investment meeting team in Dubai, and also my colleague Laura Paez, who has also been working very hard to reach out to you and also to prepare for our session. And also thank our executive secretary, Ms. Songwe, who has actually been a driver on the collaboration between ECA and the AIM in Dubai. So thank you very much, and all the best with your political objectives and political processes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. And Curtis, catch up sometime soon.
Yes, I know. I'll call you, because what you said about SDG, I think I'm interested. Like how you benchmark everything that you do against the SDG. I'd like to see like how you are doing that. That's something that could be
great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and my regards to Vera.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, our honorable speakers, for your great speeches and discussion. Dear attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to post your questions on the video wall. We will share with our speakers and they will reply to you directly or through email. If you'd like to connect with our speakers, please move to the home lobby page. You will find the speakers by typing their names under Networking tab on the right hand of your screen. We welcome our audience to interact with each other on our chat wall. Please also do not forget to tag us on our social media handles with the hashtag AIMDigital.